All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to your very favorite Bronze Age podcast. This is Flea Market Fantasy. I'm your co-host, Mike L., and as always, I'm joined by...
Michael Dell of the LCS Hockey Radio Show.
That's right. And this week, we have a very, very special guest requested by Mike Dell. This is the person who's read more comic books than probably anyone in Windsor, Kevin Morse.
Hello.
Yeah, there he is, Kevin.
Hello.
Now, just to be clear, I did kind of request you, Kevin, but the reason why Mike L. made a big deal of it is because it's supposed to be my pick this week. But even though because you're Mike L.'s friend, Mike L. is making me give up my pick for you.
That's right.
Oh, I didn't know that. He didn't tell me that.
Devil.
He's selfish like that. But Kevin, Mike L. always says you're the guy he knows who has the most comic books ever. And that you've read basically everything ever published by Marvel, like from, I don't know, up until 1990. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have probably the most books. I'm sure there's other people out there, but I have a good chunk. But yeah, I've read pretty much as I can on Marvel. I mean, all the Marvel Universe and the superheroes and stuff. Yeah, there isn't too much that I haven't read from them that I can think of.
Do you know the exact number of books you have?
I don't anymore. I've kind of gave up on that. I just buy. I mean, a lot of mine are now just in like a trade or a hardcover because I don't really care. I just want to read the stories. But at one time, I was probably up to about 18 to 20,000 books, but it's much less than that. So there's not that many anymore. I've cut a lot of those out and sold them, but then I end up buying them again because I enjoyed the stories. But I bought them in a reprint. That's how I do it. So
okay, Kevin, just to give specifics, I'm just going to throw a few titles out there. Would you say, starting from 61 to, we'll just say 61 to 91, have you read every Spider-Man?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Okay.
And when he says every Spider-Man, he means every issue of every Spider-Man title.
I have read everything Amazing, The Spectacular, Marvel Team Up. There might be a few there here and there because I picked some up later on. Okay. But I probably read them in something else, probably like in Marvel Tales. I even had Marvel Tales, Web of Spider-Man, the whole run of those, Spider-Man, even some of the early stuff in the 90s all the way through to 2000s. Wow. Yeah, I mean, Spider-Man was my go-to character. So Amazing for sure. And then I got into Spectacular Spider-Man, and then it was Web of Spider-Man, and I went back to Marvel Team Up because Marvel Team Up was finished when I started collecting, but I went back and, I had to have them,
Of course.
So
you just have to, yeah.
What about Spidey Super Stories?
I did have some of those, read some of those as well. They weren't to me at the time what do you call it? Part of the mainstream, they were the kiddie book kind of, but I actually liked some of them. So I did read them. My friend had a set of them, so I read a bunch of them as well. Wow. So.
Okay. So what about like down to the most obscure book? What about something like, I'm trying to think, what's the most obscure Marvel superhero comic? Human Fly. Have you read Human Fly?
I haven't read them all, I'll be honest, but I've read a good chunk of them. They weren't really that great, but I did read some.
How dare you?
Yeah, I know. But I did read them in that because it was funny. It was a little bit later on because so some of those titles I kind of learned about as I got back into collecting heavily in the mid 2000s, and so I went back and found some of those comics, and I remember finding the Human Fly, and I don't know where it was. And I said, "Oh my God, this looks like a Spider-Man kind of ripoff." Just the costume, yeah. And so then I started reading a little bit of him, and I became obsessed with just Marvel Universe, everything they would publish. I would literally make lists by year, by month, and then and I was kind of anally retentively collecting that way. So whatever came out publishing date wise, I would go and try to find those, and that's how I would do it. So I would read it by the year, and then I would bounce around. Sometimes I read the whole series. Sometimes I read it by like 5 years. Just kind of how the Marvel Universe was shaped and throughout the years. It's kind of interesting reading it that way because so much of the Marvel comic books and the superhero stuff was linked. Not to the level it is today where you have mass crossovers and events, but they were linked, right? So it was kind of neat to see your superheroes in and out of stuff. And So that's what it was kind of cool to read about all those issues back then.
And it all made sense, right? For the most part, there was really no big glaring contradictions back then, right?
Not really. Not any I can, pick up on. I mean, it was just like reading one large giant story with like little subplots, here and there, and like different chapters in a larger story in a sense, it was always good that.
Let me interrupt here. You're telling me Marvel did not need to create another Earth and then another Earth and then have them all have a crisis and reboot the entire continuity?
There's a glaring omission from your story about comic books, Kevin. What about DC? Tell us.
I was not a DC fan back in the day.
That's right.
I was trying to be the cool Marvel, I think, and I was really into more, I guess you can say the realistic, or at the time, we thought more serious or
like the Human
books,
Fly.
But yeah, it's funny though, because now I enjoy the DC a lot more than I would say in some of the Marvel, just the older stuff.
Don't let Mike Dell hear that.
All right, this podcast is over. Thanks for joining us, Kevin. Appreciate it.
On some of the stories, the wild and zaniness of them, but I've always been. There's just something about reading Marvel from the '60s up until the end of the '80s that are just I've always found entertaining. Just the connectivity of everything. It's really hard to. It's really hard to describe, unless you've done it. Read them all, and you can kind of see just how they kind of tried to connect everything and. And if you're reading them back then, you would. You became what they call, I guess, what the Marvel Zombie. You'd buy one or two titles, and you just had to have more and more of their titles because you liked all the heroes, how they introduced them and stuff. And you just don't, have that. It's so confusing. But back then, it was a lot easier, right? You didn't have as many titles, and if you did want to read about a character, what did you do? You bought a limited series and learned about them that way.
Right.
Now,
go ahead,
sorry,
Mike.
Michael. I was just going to ask him, how old a fellow are you, Kevin? Because Michael and I were born in mid-70s, Is that...
How old am I?
Yeah.
Yeah, I started a little bit later, though, than Mike. I'm my mid-40s. I'm 46. So I started reading probably superheroes when I was about 13. I think it was 87. I can remember the summer. I was into G.I. Joe comics a little bit before that. That was my first comic books were always around the house. I had two older sisters and, there's Archie and there was some superhero stuff out there. I knew about some of my superheroes though, like from Super Friends and Spider-Man, the reruns of the 60s cartoon and, all that stuff was on syndication, that word that people don't know. We didn't have, back then Netflix and everything. You had all these things were on TV again and you watched them that way, reruns. I mean, that was all my shows growing up, and you come home from school in the afternoons or on the weekends, and you get old shows you got to watch. So that's where I knew about a lot of the superheroes, from that way basically. And then kind of a few friends were involved, were kind of getting into the superhero comic books, and that's how I got into it. And I wanted to read about Spider-Man.
Do you remember the first book that got you in?
For me, it's kind of weird because I think I picked up some. So I always say the first kind of that got me going reading it was Spectacular Spider-Man 129. But comics where I'd actually started collecting them was G.I. Joe number 50, the first introduction of Special Missions. And that was when I first kind of went to like a convenience store and figured out you can buy them monthly and kind of collecting them for a little while. And then I got into, I think it was grade 7 or 8, and it wasn't cool to be into G.I. Joe. So I kind of stopped. We weren't supposed to do that. But then my friends were talking about this X-Men book, and it was the big thing. And they asked me if I knew about it. I said, yeah, he's got the claws. I thought it was X-Men. I thought Wolverine was X-Men. So I was a loser because I didn't know anything. So then my friend kind of introduced me all of them, and I saw he had the Spider-Man comics. So I might have read some of his Marvel Tales first. It's kind of blurry because it was all, I literally grabbed any and everything I could that summer in 87. Like I had to read everything that was Spider-Man. And then from there it was other superheroes, kind of branched out. But for that first part, it was all Spider-Man and anything I could find.
It's pretty good. Mike, Were you going to say something else, Michael, before I interrupted you?
Well, yeah, a couple things, but I was going to say it's interesting because I started my first Spider-Man was 83, I think. But then I got big into Spider-Man around the same time as you. So even though I'm 44, so I'm 2 years younger. But I got into Spider-Man around Web 37, which would have been only a few months. I had scattered issues, but it was around that summer of 87, 88 that I really got heavy into Spidey. And I became, like you said, obsessed, where Spider-Man was the first character where I had to get every comic. Like if I was at a buddy's house and he had an old Marvel Tales, I would buy it. Or Spidey Superstores, I would buy it, Just because I had to have everything. So I can totally relate.
Oh, yeah. I remember it started off where I was picking up a few at the newsstand, and then we went away in the summer. And that's where, we get into why, I picked this issue to visit my grandmother. We used to always visit her in the summer in Connecticut. And I found an old record comic store. And back then I didn't know enough about where you got back issues. I didn't know what that was. But if you found an old one someone had, I wanted to get the oldest Spider-Man that I could find. That was between my friend and I. And then when I got back, we found out about a place called Olympic Records. And we started to go there, and then he took off for the summer for a couple of weeks, and I got to babysit his comic books. It's really bizarre. I can't remember the reason why, but I remember bringing him to my house, and he had at that time probably about 100 or so books, which was a lot at that time as your young kid. And I just sat there every day and just read all the comic books he had. I mean, mainly it was Spider-Man, but then he had the X-Men and everything, so I started getting all those as well. But I'll never forget that. I mean, I was on my bike and I had bags full of comic books trying to bring them home, and I was all excited. I couldn't wait to read them all.
Awesome.
It's so nerdy.
So this book you picked today, again, Marvel Team Up 46 from 1976, and this stars your buddy Spider-Man and Deathlok.
Yes.
Deathlok.
And apparently the Demolisher, it says on the cover. I don't know who the Demolisher is, so if you look at the cover, I think there's a mistake.
Name for Deathlok, though?
Is it Deathlok Demolisher? Yeah, maybe. I always thought it was just Deathlok. I don't know. It's just funny they said Demolisher, though. I just thought that was interesting.
I think they were calling him the Demolisher for a bit. Yeah.
It's been a while. Yeah, I can't. He wasn't
when I googled Deathlok the Demolisher, auto fills in. So yeah, that's definitely was his nickname.
Okay.
Just like DC had Deathstroke the Terminator, right?
And see, I should know that. I should have known that, but like I said, it's. Come on. I know, but it's been a little while.
Have you ever read a comic book before? You need to read more comic books.
Yeah, come on, dude. Read the comic books.
As I get older, it's all stuck up there somewhere. I can't remember everything. I have to reread everything now.
Well, just some background on Marvel Team Up. This series ran from 1972 to 1985, spanning 150 issues and 7 annuals. It was originally supposed to always be Spider-Man and the Human Torch teaming up, but that lasted 3 issues, and people are like, why are we still doing this? Let's mix it up.
Yeah.
So they dropped out Torch, and it was mainly Spider-Man the rest of the way, although there were 10 issues that did not have Spider-Man at all.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. And let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 of them had the Human Torch involved. 2 had the Hulk. And then issue 137, the heroes were Aunt May and Franklin Richards. First Galactus.
Just reviewed that one. Yep.
Yes. I'm looking at some of the other heroes that were teamed up with Torch. He was with Hulk, Iceman, Thor, Iron Man, Son of Satan, and Doctor Strange. And Hulk teamed up with Spider-Woman and Kazar.
Awesome.
Oh, and also Power Man and Iron Fist as well. So,
yeah, actually, those Hulk team-ups are pretty rough because I've read them. They're pretty rough.
And the series sales, they varied wildly each month depending on who the guest star was. So our boy Jim Shooter, Michael, he decided, why are we having a series where you got to force the story onto guest stars? Let's just give Spider-Man another book and then bring in guest stars that fit the story.
Right.
And that book became Web of Spider-Man.
That's right.
Mm-hmm, that's right.
And it was terrible. But anyway.
Fair enough. And the creators here the creators here for this issue are Bill Mantlo and Saab Buscema. We've talked about them extensively on the show before. Mantlo did 22 issues of Team Up and 2 annuals, and Buscema did 13 issues and 2 annuals all told. And as we mentioned, our other hero here besides Spider-Man is Deathlok.
Mm-hmm.
Mike L., do you know his real name? Yeah, the
Oh,
Demolisher.
Deathlok's real name. Actually, no, I don't.
Yeah.
What is it?
Luther Manning. So he's like the fourth Manning brother. Peyton, Eli, Cooper, and Luther Manning.
Okay.
That's an American football joke. You guys are Canadian. Come on.
I got it. I know what you're talking about. Yeah. I was about to say something. Yeah.
His first appearance was in Astonishing Tales 25.
That's right.
1974. Kevin, do you know who created Deathlok?
I can't remember. I know George Perez, as one of his first early works, is in that book. I believe he did some of that, but I don't know.
Yeah,
I can't remember who created it. I didn't go. I should have done my background again. It's been a while.
That is correct.
Okay.
Rich Buckler is the artist, and Doug Mensch.
Okay.
In fact, I just bought Rich Buckler's book, How to Draw Dynamic Comics, and on the back cover, big picture of Deathlok.
Really? Huh.
Wow.
So Luther Manning, he was an Army colonel who was mortally wounded by a concussive mine during a War Games accident in 1985. So this is always set in the future. Major Simon Riker salvaged Manning's remains and used them in a top-secret military program called Project Alpha Mech, which was to create cybernetic super soldiers.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I know. The nerve of this fella. So after 5 years in stasis, Manning was reanimated, I should say, as Deathlok. And Michael, do you know why what the name Deathlok means?
No, I don't. What does it mean?
Because he is locked in a death-like state.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's why he's Deathlok. Yeah, Deathlok the Demolisher.
Okay.
And I guess that's it, because it's just him and Spidey in this issue, really. And
well, there's another guy that shows up, but they don't give him a name, do they?
No, they don't. We'll talk about that when we get there. But yeah,
who's that? Who shows up?
Just some guy.
Yeah.
In a costume. But all right, so I guess we can get to the book then, Michael. Is there anything else to say about Marvel Team Up?
No, other than that I should plug our Here Comes the Spider-Cast podcast, in which we're reviewing every 80s Spider-Man comic book, including Marvel Team Up.
Yeah.
So we never did this one. We started at 95, I think, and we went forward. So this is new for me, this one.
Yeah.
But yeah, so let's start off with this cover here. I was going to say this earlier, still only 25 cents. So like Kevin was saying, if you wanted to buy every Marvel comic at this time, you could probably spend what, like $7 or something? Not even.
No, not even.
$5.
Yeah.
$4. Yeah, it's great. Marvel Team Up featuring Spider-Man, Deathlok. We got Mike Dell and I talked about this recently. Instead of having corner boxes, we've got corner circles here.
That's right.
With a really cool Spidey pose and then a Deathlok pose on the other side. These are great. Although I will point out that with all this text and images, about almost a quarter of the book is taken up, eh?
Yeah.
With just all that stuff at the top. It's kind of funny.
Pretty much. I like the, so we get, Marvel Team Up featuring Spider-Man and Deathlok. I like the Deathlok logo because the O is like a sniper sight.
Right.
Yeah.
Skull.
That's
I like
true,
the skull at the top. Yeah. Good times.
Yep. And then
Also,
we got a little...
coloring's different too. He's pretty gray in that cover, Deathlok. His whole body, if you look at that.
Yeah, like, that's true.
Yeah.
And then we got this blurb here. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, like even like the flesh parts are gray.
Yeah, that's it's interesting because when you go into the book, you find out that he's not all gray.
Right? Yeah. It could be an error, I guess.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe it's an effect.
So then we get a blurb here: frenzy in the not too distant future. By the way, that's one of my least favorite. I don't know if it's not an expression, but just like remember X-Men 1 opened up with the the text on the screen said the not too distant future. It's just really awkward to me. I don't like it. But anyway,
all right.
That's beside the point. Anyway, the battle you demanded. What's that?
Let me add that to the list of Michael pet peeves.
There you go.
Distant future.
Add it to your notes. The battle you demanded, the web slinger versus the demolisher. And then at the bottom, the crucial question is, am I now or have I ever been?
That's the question I ask every day when I wake up.
Exactly.
Yeah,
The
every
answer
morning.
will astonish you. Awesome. And that's a little play on his book, Astonishing Tales. But anyway.
All right. And so the cover itself, we have Deathlok here on the left shooting a gun at Spider-Man, who is about to web him up. Or I guess he is webbing him up. He's webbing up the gun hand. That's why Deathlok missed, I guess.
Yeah.
And
cool
also,
cover.
this is Spider-Man, Kevin, with the webs under the arms. Do you like that look?
That was always the classic look. I mean, it's funny because when you saw some of the versions of him, I didn't know that he had that until I read their early issues, like, you know, Steve Ditko and where it was probably much more emphasized than later on in the 70s and whatnot. So it was kind of interesting. Yeah. I always liked that effect because I didn't realize, like I said, he had it, but I thought it was kind of a neat idea. As long as it wasn't overemphasized, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's cool.
Yeah. And we get to see some people in the background. The one guy looks very irate. His arms are up. Yeah. He's screaming. I don't know.
It's very angry.
But yeah, it's a good cover, a good action shot, and it's drawn by the aforementioned Rich Buckler.
That's right.
So,
that's right.
Yep, solid cover.
Yep, no doubt.
And then we get inside and we got Bill Mantlo and Sal Buscema with Mike Esposito on inks, right?
Yep.
Nice.
And it's like, I think at this point, it's like Bill Mantlo and Sal Buscema were like a name brand because they had done like a ton of issues of Hulk. Maybe it was after this, but and they also did.
They got later, yeah.
They also did ROM Space Knight, right?
I believe so. I know Bill Mantlo did a lot of that. He did a lot of licensed stuff. Did he not?
Yeah, and Sal Buscema definitely started on ROM because I remember the first issue was by him. So I'll
have to go into my collection and look.
Yeah, there you go. He's got every issue, so every Marvel comic, so you might as well. Okay, so yeah, here we go. So now this is Future Shock Part 2, so I didn't realize that this actually picked up from, I guess, Astonishing Tales 33 to 36. So I'm going to assume that Spider-Man just appeared on the last page of that issue, right?
This actually is part of Marvel Team Up, an issue before where he visits Killraven. So I don't know if it also tied to Astonishing Tales that way, but he was traveling, and there's mention of that in the story about, so it picks up from that. I think that because he has the time machine thingamajigger platform from Victor Von Doom in this. I don't know. Yes, I didn't go back and read that issue. It's been a while, but I do recall that it was a weird kind of thing that he was traveling through time. And I can't remember why.
Yes, because if you look at the splash page, we got Spider-Man hiding behind a corner of like a broken down wall here. It looks like they're in a destroyed city, and Deathlok's creeping around with his gun drawn, and above Spider-Man is a giant yellow thing. And I guess
it's a glow from it.
Doom's
See, I didn't realize that was part of that time travel thing until the very end.
Yeah, because I had bought this issue, like I say, it was one of my first issues, but when I went back way later on, I was picking them up. I remember going, oh, okay, I see. Because I never understood that when I was younger, what the heck was going on, that he was time traveling. We can get into that a bit more, obviously, we talk about. But yeah, he lands in, I think Splash Bay, he's in Times Square. He recognizes he's in Times Square, but it doesn't look like it should.
Right.
Yeah, the Deathlok stories were tied into Astonishing Tales.
Right.
Yeah.
And Spider-Man is still Marvel Team Up. And I did look at that previous issue with Killraven, like Kevin mentioned, and it says it takes place in a far distant future, Mike Ella, 2019.
Whoa, interesting.
That's really far.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, it's 2020.
Yeah, we've now outlived the Killraven story. So, how about that? Because I think this story here takes place in the crazy future of 1990, I think, right?
Yeah, it's 1990. That's right.
Right before grunge takes over the world.
And I thought it was interesting, reading it when I was younger and saying, oh, that's 3 years from now. Because the book was actually referenced, they say 15 years into the future, because the book was written before 1976. I guess it was obviously, just how long it took for publication. He mentioned the year 1975, even though this was probably would have been on the stands in March or April, is what's usually 2-3 months ahead of 1976. So it's kind of interesting there from a publication standpoint, how long it takes them to get the books out back then.
They actually have it here in the details here in the splash page at June 76. June 76.
Nice.
Right, yeah. And then there's somewhere in the story he mentions the year 1975, which I thought was kind of, because you as a reader are reading it in 76 and you're going, well, why is he saying 1975? But obviously probably when they wrote it was 75, I'm assuming. Maybe I shouldn't, but...
maybe Mantler's is really high. You don't know.
Yeah.
So anyway, so Spidey is, like we said, he's up against this wall in Times Square, but it's in a dystopian future. Deathlock's coming around the corner, and Spidey doesn't know what's going on, but he sees Deathlock.
And by the way, Michael, maybe we should maybe describe what Deathlock looks like for people who don't know.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah. So Deathlock is a cyborg, and so half of his face is like metallic. Or kind of like, like a chrome kind of like, skin. And then the other half is human, but it's also, like he says in the book, he's decaying. So it's almost, I don't say zombie-esque, but it's like...
Kind of. Like his nose is kind of missing, because remember, he was mortally wounded in an explosive mine, like a landmine. Right. So his face is all burned and charred and scarred.
Yeah, you're right. It's like missing his nose and like... The eye on his robot side is like a big red eye. So I don't know if that's also robotic or it's just big and red. I don't know.
Just bloodshot. He hasn't got any sleep.
Yeah. And then basically he's got like kind of like a red. It's kind of hard to tell what's his skin and what's his uniform, but he has like a red shirt and then he has like pale blue gloves, but also pale blue skin, I think. So it's kind of hard to tell, right? Like where his...
his skin's kind of like brownish, like.
Yeah. Okay, you're right. I was looking at flipping back to the cover, but you're right.
In
the interior, it's more distinct. That his skin is just his face and his neck, and the rest is all his like costume. That's like silver and then red and then a little bit of blue and yellow. So
it's a combination of his cybernetics and everything. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I would say his skin is just like a charred white fella.
Right. Yeah, and like it's kind of hard. Like the design of his costume is like I said, red shirt, kind of like a yellow trim, and then like a yellow stripe down the middle, and and then he's got a yellow ray gun, laser gun. So.
The Flash Gordon gun, as I like to call it.
Right.
And then he's got a backpack.
He's also got a yellow. Yeah, he's got a yellow backpack and a yellow gun holster too. So it's a pretty cool design.
All right.
So
anyway.
So Spider-Man's trying to figure out what's going on. He doesn't know who this guy is. He's never seen him. But he sees that Deathlock is targeting this group of kids. And Spidey's like, hey, I don't care where I am or what year this is. Gunning down kids just doesn't make it anytime. So then he attacks...
I mean, let's be honest though, Mike. Our kids are the worst, right? I mean, so...
You should have let him kill them.
This is like a heel turn from Spider-Man. Turning evil. Stopping kids from being murdered.
The funny thing about the kids in this, I have to add, though, is there's many, and as we go through it, they don't look like kids in some of the pictures to me. So they look like more adult-like, or just some of the way they look. There's close-ups they maybe do, but I just found that, they didn't really look like kids in certain frames.
We should also mention they're all wearing like green jumpsuits.
Yeah, and that was the fashion in 1990. I remember that.
And they're carrying cubes, which will come into play here in a minute. But,
that's right.
Yeah, so he... Oh, go ahead, Michael.
I was going to say, one of the things about Sal Buscema, he's not great at drawing kids, so he tends to make them all look like adults. I think that's the problem.
Yeah, and I could tell by the style. Like I knew it was him, so I was like, oh, okay. But, I mean, whatever. You get it in the description. You understand it's kids,
right.
So...
Yeah, I took him to be like, 17, 18 or something.
Yeah, I did. It just, there's some, there's just some I just went, it's kind of, it's debatable.
but yeah, Spider-Man jumps on Deathlock, and Deathlock, of course, being the cybernetic killing machine he is, says, who the blazes?
I know.
That's what you say.
Oh, did I tell you that I've got a Facebook friend from Italy? I've never met him. I've only talked to him on Facebook. But up until I told him, he thought that what the blaze is was a common American expression because he's read it in so many comic books.
It's a very common expression, yeah.
It is, Michael.
I mean,
Kevin, you're Canadian as well, I take it, right?
I'm a Canadian and American, and my mom, who's American, always says who the blaze is. So.
All right. Yeah, see right there, Michael. Proof.
Yeah, I guess I was wrong.
But, we should also mention, Michael, that Deathlok has a computer telling him stuff in his brain.
Yes.
Like,
yes.
This computer analyzes situations and tells him things. It's almost like a spider sense, but not quite.
They analyze everything, which is kind of a cool thing to have.
Yeah.
And also, Kevin, it kind of reminds me of a certain character from DC that I'm sure you're familiar with, who also had access to a computer that gave him information. Do you know who I'm talking about? Created by Jack King Kirby.
Oh, my mind just went blank. Why would you do that to me?
Yeah. It's DC.
I'll give you a hint. The first letter of his name is O. OMAC.
Is it OMAC? Okay. You know what? I didn't read OMAC that much. I knew what you. Yeah.
Who in the blue hell is OMAC? Never heard of him in my life.
He's a Kirby creation.
Yeah. And I do, and I have to admit, I've glanced through my OMAC stuff. I haven't really read it yet. Yes. But I am aware because of, the blue eye. But the other thing I was thinking, even that inner voice, I was thinking of right away when you said that, DC, I was thinking of Firestorm and the Professor and how he had that inner voice talking to him. Do you know what I mean? In terms of kind of, he could talk and, so it's kind of a
another
neat concept.
Great DC character. Okay. Back to the story. Okay.
Yes.
So anyway, so Spidey and Deathlok are having words, and then they look. So then, as that's going on, we realize these kids are not just kids. They're like zombie kids, right? And they're dangerous, or they could be dangerous. We don't know for sure yet. So Spidey and Deathlok are exchanging insults here. You idiot! They've spotted us, right? And then and so they're fighting back and forth. But then these guys, they start fighting. They start attacking them as one with these cubes in their hands. I don't even know. And then they're like holding them up. And it's like it's so funny because Deathlok's using all these like 1975 expressions like, we stand about as much chance of coming out of this as a snowball in hell. It's just kind of funny. I guess that could still be around in 1990, but
yeah, why not? And Michael, I just looked up this OMAC fella. Holy hell, is he stupid looking? But I guess he was created in 1974, the same year as Deathlok.
Who was?
They were both created in 74. Deathlok and OMAC.
Really?
Yeah.
I think you mean OMAC.
OMAC.
Yeah, OMAC.
And then, of course, OMAC inspired Steve Jobs to come up with the iMac.
You're right. Of course, everybody knows.
But I'm gonna guess that Kirby just ripped off Marvel. I don't know. We'll say that.
I doubt it. I mean,
I would say it was the time period. There was a big push for all that sci-fi cyborg stuff, if I were in movies and things too. And that's the thing, right? With a lot of comics, I always say to people, if you're reading superhero books, especially, or any comics, if you really want to get an idea of what was popular just in, Western culture at the time, pick up a comic book. Cause, I think a lot of stuff was inspired or they were influenced at the time by the editors and that to follow the latest trends. I mean, you got kung fu books, you've got all these variations on things. So I just recall there was a lot of cheesy sci-fi stuff out at that time and apocalyptic type things. So I wonder if they all got kind of shared and kind of pulled from all those different.
Well, there's probably an older, medium. There's probably like a novel somewhere that we don't know about. That
for sure. Yeah, secret novel.
But anyway. Yeah, so while they're arguing back and forth, Spider-Man is still like, well, I guess I'm going to have to fight these kids. So he leaps over and punches two of them in the face. Meanwhile, Deathlok pulls out his ray gun and shoots one of them. Zzz. And then Spider-Man's like, they're taking off, all except this one guy who finally realized I've KO'd him and the one who got zapped. This dialogue is awkward, but that's okay. They seem to play for keeps around here. So Deathlok keeps shooting them as they're running away. And Spidey's like, they're gone for now. Now suppose you start talking, friend. Starting why you jumped me. So basically Spider-Man explains that he just assumed that Deathlok was the bad guy, and that's why he tried to help the kids. And Deathlok is like, well, I'm actually involved in this global war, and he tries to explain, who this Riker guy is. Riker's like, I don't know anything about this stuff. So Riker, I guess, is like a bad guy who...
Riker's the guy who turned him into Deathlok.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So he's like, hold on, pal, I ain't so old that I don't remember us putting a man on the moon, getting involved in a global war, and letting Riker get strong enough with all his blasted computers to run the whole show. So this is almost like a Terminator style thing, right? Where the computers are, well, not computers, but Riker with these machines is taking over everything, I assume, right?
Yeah.
And then
Flash forward like 2 years from today, Michael. That's what it's going to be like here.
Yep.
AI takes over everything.
And then he's like, letting him turn some of us into man-made monsters, cyborgs. The name's Deathlok, friend. Welcome to 1990. 1 year before grunge hits. But anyway, they didn't say
1990. Love it.
So yeah, that's pretty cool. So
Spider-Man is shaken to his core. He's looking around. He's like, oh my God, what's going on?
So am I.
And Spider-Man's upset because Deathlok's never heard of him. He's like, and you've never heard of Spider-Man? Look, pal, I lay some dead for 5 years in one of Riker's body banks. Some memories they let me keep. Some they figured weren't important, and they erased them. I guess they erased Spider-Man.
What a shot at Spider-Man. Just telling him he's not important.
Yeah.
Spider-Man. You're not important. Yeah, forget about the apocalyptic dystopian society, all the kids turning into cannibalistic zombies. None of that matters. What really gets Spider-Man upset, Deathlok never heard of him.
Right.
Yeah. Did I exist?
You never heard of me?
There's also this gross part where Cyborg basically says that the kids can smell him because cyborgs have a decay factor. Kind of gross.
Yeah, his flesh is decaying, and those kids are cannibals. And they want to eat his decaying flesh.
Yeah, they're muty cannibals, I think.
Muties. That's right.
Yeah.
Mutant cannibals. Now, here's the most disturbing part of the entire book, though. Forget about the mutant cannibal kids roaming the streets and all that. They see a giant billboard of like a smoking advertisement.
Yeah.
And this blonde-haired fella, has his mouth opened and like a inflatable blow-up doll. And
yeah, you're right. Like a glory hole.
and the ad says above it, "For pleasure." So yeah, this is very disturbing.
Yikes.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. Yeah, so it said smoke, and I think they're trying to say camel, it looks like, but it's cut off the ad.
Yeah, I smoked cigarettes or something, but very, very weird.
It's also funny how big the hole is in his mouth, that these two guys, full-size guys, can just stand there and like have a conversation like broad daylight, but... So yeah, these two guys are watching Spidey and Deathlok walk by, and they're basically talking about what they should do. And it's like, Cyborg coming into sight, Strake. About time. We've been waiting all morning, ever since the Omni computer latched onto the signals coming from that freak. But who's that guy in the party suit with him? Never saw him before. Maybe we should check with Central. So basically they decide, now let's just kill him. Let's just kill them both. So then
I guess these guys work for Riker, and you can tell they're bad because they're wearing green jumpsuits.
Yep.
Yeah. Green jumpsuits means bad. Yep.
But luckily, Spider-Man has his spider sense, so he knows that something's going on. So he's like, Deathlok, we're being watched. And he's like, correction, chum. And all of a sudden, he's Adam West. We're being shot at.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Spider-Man does what any superhero does, that he uses the body of the person he's carrying
he does.
as a body shield.
He doesn't intentionally use the body as
he
a
gets
shield.
shot.
I kid.
Yeah. They shoot him off his shoulder.
Yeah.
So now he's dead.
Yeah,
he's like, oh, so that sucks. I did all that work, to knock him out, not kill him, and now he's dead.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so Spider-Man just loses his mind here. He goes nuts and just starts attacking the fellas with the sniper rifles. And,
so he's dodging. So they're shooting at him. He's dodging bullets, but he's coming for them, right? So then
it's a pretty cool sequence, Michael. Describe the sequence of the...
I liked it.
We're seeing this, from the POV of the snipers, and so we're only looking through the, what is that called? The
scope.
The scope.
Yeah.
So Spider-Man is swinging and they're shooting at him, but he's dodging their bullets. And then, pardon me, in the fourth one, we see him come right up to the scope. And then the next panel, splash page, he smashes through that glory hole and kicks them both in the face. It's great.
It's great.
He kicks one of them in the face.
Yeah, he kicks one of them in the face.
Yeah.
And the other guy is just recoiling in fear.
Yeah. Because that other guy starts shooting at him some more.
Right. Yeah.
But then Deathlok. Deathlok doesn't play. You know?
That's right.
He's shoot to kill.
That's right. And then, I love this. Then we see that the other guy's been shot. And then it cuts over. And all of a sudden, we find out the origin of this action movie cliche. Deathlok says, "This a private party? Or is anybody invited?"
I forgot about that's right.
Do you think this is the first time that's ever been said? Because really, that's a staple of pretty much every 80s action film.
It could be.
And here it is, 1974 or whatever.
I'll have to find. I'm going to do some research.
It could be the first one ever.
Yeah. Coining the term. So Deathlok just kills the dude, and then what happens then, Mike? Oh, they hear chanting.
They hear chanting. That's right. And then Deathlok's like, "Yep, our little playmates are back, looking for the mutie we captured." So then we cut over. Now we see the unnamed villain.
This is very weird.
Yeah, we don't find out who he is, but he's a guy in a yellow spandex suit with green trunks and boots and gloves. And then a lime green mask and a purple cape.
Not sure why he has to be dressed in a villain costume.
Garb. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I mean, it's this future.
It was so strange because we have all those kids in the green jumpsuits behind him with their cubes, and then he's in front of them all with his hand raised and his cube in his other hand, like he's clearly their leader. And Deathlok and Spider-Man are seeing this, and not one of them comments on it. They don't say, "Oh, who's that guy in the green underpants there?" In the yellow suit. Nothing. No mention of them.
No. Just, there they all are together.
And it's funny because usually in comic books, they'll be like, "Who's this guy?" And then the guy will introduce himself, right? But
they'll make a big thing out of him. And it's like, is he like the sergeant or captain? And they wear silly clothes like that?
Right.
Or, should he have had maybe like an orange jumpsuit or a blue jumpsuit? I don't know.
Such tough questions.
So
Deathlok and Spider-Man jump out of that billboard's mouth, and then the green kids, they blow it up with like an energy blast from their cubes.
That's right.
It's very powerful cubes.
Yeah.
Yep. I'm just looking. I actually went to marvelfandom.com to see if they name this guy, and they don't. So
it's just some dude.
Right. Crazy. So there's no name for this guy. So back to the story. So then Spidey and Deathlok are fist fighting these guys, right?
Yep.
And then they punch out the nameless leader, and then everybody runs away basically, and it's just left. So just Spidey and Deathlok are left with the leader, but then they unmask him, and it's just another kid. And Spider-Man's like, "Look at him, Deathlok. Under his mask, he's just a kid younger than me. Is he what you should be fighting? Or is it the system that made him and you what you're really up against? It's a wonderful life you've got here, fighting all the side issues while the real problems sit on top and laugh at all of you. I pray that this isn't our future, the future of my time."
Oh, it is in our future, Spider-Man. It's happening today. But look at they were already fighting kids,
Yeah.
So why is it a big shock that the dude underneath the mask is also a kid? I guess they thought because he had the fancy costume, he must be their leader. But it's just another kid. But I don't know. It seems like you're already fighting kids.
Well,
and then really that big of a surprise?
I love Sal. I love our pal Sal. But this storytelling is a little awkward because then he walks off panel, and then there's just a flash of lightning, and he's gone. And then at the bottom it says, "Within the alley hovers the time platform of Victor Von Doom, the vehicle that carried Spidey back from past to future and back again." And with a flash, it's gone. So if you had not read the previous issue, I can't imagine anyone figuring out what the hell was going on. I don't know. Not great storytelling.
No, and I mean, as we get into talking about this, this story just stirred me even back when I was 13.
For what reason?
Part of it was
okay.
Well, no, I mean, it wasn't Spidey to me.
Okay.
I don't know if we're gonna. I mean, okay, I'll let you continue on the thing. Are we gonna talk about that, or should I?
Well,
comment
Well,
now, or-
there is one panel left. Maybe
Yeah.
close
Yes,
out
finish
like
finish that key panel.
So yeah, Deathlok is, pardon me, Deathlok is walking away, and he's like, "I think it's about time I did what I've been meaning to do, Pewter, and had that showdown between me and Riker once and for all." It takes place in Astonishing Tales number 36, Marv. So we have a little editor's note that ruins the drama of the scene, and then we just
Well, they have to tell you. Well, they have to tell you where to find the story because next issue it's not here. It's not in the team up.
I know, but they could have done it more fluidly.
And you do know that Astonishing Tales number 36, I believe, was his last issue for Deathlok.
And then, for like how long?
I think he then was interspersed throughout other appearances. I'm trying to remember where. I think he moved into Marvel Spotlight. I'm trying to remember now where he was, but that was it. It was a run there, and the comic also ended after issue 36.
Really?
Yeah.
Didn't he get his own series in like the 90s or something?
I should really catch up on more.
I'll just tell you guys
I'm gonna have to
quickly
start
that
studying everything.
Deathlok next appears in Marvel Spotlight number 33 in April 77. And this issue was June 76. So a year later.
A new Deathlok, Michael Collins, debuted in the miniseries Deathlok 1 through 4 in 1990. And
there was appearances.
Deathlok.
Yeah,
I didn't realize there was appearances. Deathlok.
And then you didn't realize the guy who appeared in the Deathlok special 1 through 4 was Deathlok?
No, there was a different Deathlok. I said.
Oh yeah.
It's a different one. It's modernized. They were trying to modernize it, and
he also got his own series then, a 34-issue series from 91 to 94.
Deathlok appeared in, I think, Captain America, the old Deathlok. He intermittently, he was in different issues. Very few though. But after that was his kind of his run, and it just kind of faded out. So it was basically, it's just funny that they promote that issue, and that was it for that issue.
Yeah, Deathlok was in 3 issues of Captain America, 286, 287, and 288 from 1983. So yeah, it looks like they just dropped Luther Manning then and brought in Michael Collins. And we should mention Deathlok was also featured in Marvel Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., the TV show.
Yes, the pilot. I remember that,
okay. Wow.
But he was a regular character then later on. He was in quite a bit.
Yeah, the early 90s there is where Marvel picked up on a lot of these 70s kind of obscure that kind of ran their course. Mm-hmm. And that's when they brought all these characters back that maybe, I think they kind of faded out in the early 80s or late 70s. You've got Ghost Rider they brought back as a new character. Luke Cage was brought back as himself, but there was just a lot of that because a lot of those characters that were created in the 70s were a lot more darker and more anti-hero. Mm-hmm. And that became really big in the early 90s. So it's kind of interesting. You'd see all these characters, and a lot of people didn't even know who they were. I didn't know who they were until they came out. Yeah, Quasar,
so gritty. Quasar.
Yeah.
Well, him and his bracelets. So gritty.
Well, some were, a good chunk were dark.
Yeah.
But
it's true, though, because, you're right. Yeah. It was a weird, because, I had been reading Marvel Comics for at least 5 years by that point, and I'd never heard of any of these characters other than seeing them maybe in Marvel Universe. But Deathlok, who the hell is that? So that was kind of cool.
Yeah, exactly. And Ghost Rider, I think I just saw in it was advertisements in the books, because I'd have some older Spider-Mans or something, and I'd see, they show a cover of one of the titles or whatever, but I didn't know who he was really until that stuff came out. And then that's when I got into, later on wanting to read those, because it's I want to know how these characters started and how they developed. And it's quite interesting. They took the concepts, but they were trying to really modernize them.
And then it says, Michael, there's an ad right after that where it says, our stupendous storyline continues in Marvel 2-in-1, number 17. Back in the present, as Spidey teams up with the ever-loving blue-eyed Thing. So
it's clobber time. Sorry.
What a scam this is by Marvel, just to rope these kids into buying 3 books a month, because you got to get Astonishing Tales, Marvel Team Up, and Marvel 2-in-1 just to understand what's happening.
Well, I'll just tell you right now, currently, if I'm buying a series, no matter how much I'm enjoying it, if it tells me at the end of the story that I have to pick up another comic to find out the rest of the story, I drop it. That's my rule. So that's my other pet peeve.
It's rough. Let me add it to the list. Mike L. Pet peeves.
All right.
So Kevin, you were saying that this Spider-Man in this book isn't really Spidey. You thought it was like too dark or too...
Yeah, well, it was really funny because I was getting back into, like I said, just getting into the comics, and they picked up this issue. I was all excited. It was 25 cents. It was super old, to me at the time. It was my oldest Spider-Man book I could find. The hippie at the comics record store grabbed it for me, and he was literally a hippie. But when I read it, I was kind of really... if you look at the whole book, it's very dark. Everything's destroyed. Everything's just so blah. Like there's no grandiose villains. Well, except for at the end, but I wouldn't really call him grandiose. That guy.
Yeah, don't know who he is.
Deathlok is just so disturbing to look at. Really, think about it as a kid. He's half, and he kills. Yeah. This is even before I even knew much about I don't think I read anything with Punisher. I think someone mentioned, one of my friends mentioned Punisher. So to me to see like a character kill and then Spider-Man's kind of allowing it. And it was just such a disturbing issue for me when I was younger. And when I was reading it again, it brought back flashbacks saying, and the story itself to me just kind of was like, I don't get what's going on. You basically just wanted, it was to introduce, well, I got it, but it was so, think about it. It's, you come here, you have a mistake. The guy wants to kill these kids. You fight him. Then you go, okay, we'll team up, carry a body around, body dies, gets shot, beat up a couple more guys in green. And then you get another group at the end in green and you fight them and go, oh my God, it's kids. Terrible place you live here. Bye. I'll see you later. I'm going into my time machine. And then Deathlok walks away and you're like, what just happened? It's just not a Spidey story, It's just there's no happiness in the story, and I guess I understand that they're trying to go with that. But as a kid back then, loving Spider-Man, I would be like, oh, I wouldn't like it. But I mean, I think they were trying to highlight this new character, Deathlok, and maybe that's what they thought their intent was with Marvel Team Up. But I don't think it always would hit. It sounds like it didn't do itself justice, and that's like you said with Jim Shooter going, well, what's the point of doing it this way? So
one of the criticisms that we always have of Marvel Team Up is it just seems like a commercial for the other character's book usually, which is fine. That's understandable why they would do that. The one thing I'll give this book credit for is at least it contrasts their two characters, like the way that Spider-Man is kind of like always criticizing him for being as as cold-hearted as he is or whatever. So at least there's that, and it's kind of interesting to see. Like, it's one thing to read about 1990 in the future, but it's another thing to read Spider-Man in 1995 in the future. So that's, or 1990 or whatever it is. So that's kind of cool. So today, in that I kind of went, okay, I see what they're doing, but I just brought back to, I remember the memories of it. It was a huge letdown when I was younger, just because I wasn't expecting that. And I think, and you know what? It wasn't a letdown that I think I was disturbed by the story, which I think maybe they got it across for me then, that I was so disturbed about the future and how horrible it was, this future. And it's like, hope it doesn't end up that way. And they try to kind of say that Spider-Man kind of goes, well, maybe this is not my timeline. There's multiple timelines or some, he kind of alludes to or mentions that, kind of give the reader like, oh, I hope not either, So, but I mean, in terms of that, those concepts, you're right. There was the good and the bad. Like you have the Deathlok shoot to kill, and then you have Spidey that's not like that. He's just his fist. So, they kept obviously that idea, but I think it was more too. I was disturbed. So maybe it was effective then. Maybe that aspect of it, it got a response on me at least, not just, so.
Right. Yeah, this isn't a wisecracking Spider-Man here. Making fun.
Yeah, no, not much at all.
Mike L. Kevin brings up the point about Deathlok killing people. Like, what is the earliest Marvel superhero to kill people? Is this it? 74?
Well, it might have been. I don't know, but it might have been Wolverine. But
that was later.
Yeah, he killed later in the X-Men. Punisher, but he was considered a villain, right?
But what year did Punisher debut?
74.
74. Yeah,
74, early 74 as well.
Yeah, and 73.
Well, things were getting darker. Like if you think about movies, this is around the time that Charles Bronson, what was that movie?
Death Wish,
like that. Oh. Then you have Dirty Harry, right?
Well, I guess Conan was killing people, right? And
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Like 70. He was probably the first.
He doesn't count.
Yeah, Conan was killing. Yeah, he was killing.
He was a medieval, but in terms of the so-called superhero, I mean, it's funny, they incorporate him in, but at that time he was considered just like a medieval, their adaptation of it.
Well, now he's in the Avengers, so anyway.
I think Killraven was killing in his series.
Wait, well, his name's Kill. It has to. I don't even know who Killraven is. I saw he was in that previous issue. Like, can you explain who Killraven is, Kevin? Like,
Killraven's in a futuristic world. It's part of the War of the Worlds series. So it's all that whole thing, the original War of the Worlds. So he's basically, in a nutshell, he's from a future. He's kind of like a barbarian type of guy from the future. I don't know a lot myself. I've only read pieces of him. I was never really interested in him as much. So
just like Conan in the future.
Kind of, yeah, it was. And so I think if I recall, a lot of those times, the ones where they have swords and things like that, I mean, obviously they're going in there. It's kind of hard not to kill people if you're swinging a sword right at them. So, but as your masked classic superheroes, I think around that time is where Punisher again was, kind of a anti-hero, wasn't really yet. He was kind of a supporting character. Of course, they did have a couple of stuff they were doing in their black and white magazines, as I think was where you would have seen more of that adult style of killing, if I recall, on some of the things. But yeah, I think Deathlok's one of those early ones that you had that, but I think it started in that period. Like, Mike was saying, things were getting really dark. It was just things that were going on historically. I think, just people had a lot of negativity and just feeling things weren't going well in the world. And so you kind of saw that in the books and then in movies, everything.
Mike, just real quick, I thought I heard you say that Conan is now joining the Avengers. Is that true?
Apparently. Well, that's why I can't take current Marvel seriously. I mean, I try not to be that old man yelling at a cloud, but when I hear stuff like that, it's just like ridiculous.
Yeah, that's absurd.
Yeah.
Conan. Yeah.
But getting back to Deathlok, I just want to say, I want to ask you guys both a question. Am I crazy, or would you rather Deathlok, and this goes for all superheroes, like, with a few exceptions, I don't give a shit about the Mike Collins Deathlok or the whatever Hayes Deathlok. I want to see the original. So it really irritates me when they bring back a character, like even Johnny Blaze. They bring back Ghost Rider. Let's just make him Danny Ketch. Like, why don't they just use the original? It just drives me nuts.
Is it to like the passage of time? Is it like one way to get around that? Like, just to say, like, Johnny Blaze was in the 70s. Obviously Spider-Man's still going. I understand that, but
because they're all they're all kind of ageless, right? So to me, it's so much easier just keep it as the same guy. I don't know. That's just me.
Yeah, I don't understand that too, because we got in a whole argument where people say the original Guardians of the Galaxy were lame and the newer ones and the show or whatever are so cool. Yet,
I mean,
it's how it's presented. It's how it's written. I mean, you could pull the old ones. I mean, heck, you pulled a tree out from a 50s suspense thing. Groot.
Well, that's
Rocket Raccoon was the silliest character, but I remember no one, that Hulk issue, everyone went, I don't want that issue. It's got a stupid raccoon guy in it. It was a joke. Now it's, like, oh, it's so cool. But, it's who tells it. But yeah, I don't understand why sometimes, unless you feel you need a full remake and it's been so long. But I don't understand that either, why they do that every time.
Right. So I once tricked one of my friends, and I said, why did they, instead of using the original lineup of the Guardians, why did they have to get all these other characters and call them the Guardians? And then his explanation was that those old characters were too old and no one was interested in them. So then that
doesn't make any sense.
But I pulled the ace up. I had an ace up my sleeve because Groot is from the 1950s, and no one had ever heard of him for 50 years. So. Anyway.
Well, a lot of the characters, like Drax was created in early 73. Gamora was in the 70s. She came out of Strange Tales. Who else we got there? Mantis is from the early 70s. I remember that was one of my early books I got with, she was a 20-cent cover book. Those were all characters in those early 70s. I mean, not many years separating the original Guardians. Were 68, 69. And at the same time, some of those characters of Guardians came out in the mid 70s as well. I think like Starhawk. So I don't understand either. Like they could have worked. It's just, I guess they wanted so much contrast with the characters. Maybe there's so much difference maybe compared to some of the others. I don't know. I don't justify that. I don't support that reasoning because it's really, to me, I just don't. It bothers me because it's the writer. You could take the crappiest characters, which they have, and people have whole B-rated, C-rated characters.
Yep, like Swamp
and have
Thing,
made them, have made them amazing. Right? Yeah. I mean, because the concepts are there. I mean, some of them aren't really good. Look at even Deathlok, for example. I mean, that concept is kind of neat, and then they brought it back because, hey, that's kind of a cool idea, and we'll just clean it up and modernize it for the 90s. Of course, they had to make a different character, make different person. But the whole thing about Deathlok is, they can make it work.
If only we could hear Kevin. I'm sure it's brilliant.
Yeah, I thought it was just on my end.
No,
you can't hear me at all? Oh, my gosh.
No, all of that was lost. All that was lost.
Yeah.
Oh, no. Well, I've got it in my recording, hopefully.
I just missed that.
Oh.
All right.
Yeah, that was nothing important.
Yeah, it's on your recording. The listeners can hear it later.
But Kevin, when you were rattling off all the info about like Mantis being a 20-cent book and all that stuff, it made me think, like, of all your comics that you have, what is your prized possession? Like, what's the one book you're like, this is the best?
Oh, that is tough to answer. That is really hard for me to answer.
You don't have one that sticks out.
I don't do it by like some people go, what's the value? I don't even do that because I don't have anything very expensive. I don't. I mean, my books are, in a time when things they're still cheap, but I don't have for me, there's certain runs probably that, I just loved. Can you guys still hear me? Or am I out? Again?
You're still cutting out a lot.
Am I? Oh, shoot. I wonder if I'm losing my connection. I hope not. I don't have a favorite. Book. So, yeah, that's tough. I have lots I love.
Well, I'm just going to go with Human Fly number 6. All right, we'll just say that. Human Fly number 6.
Perfect.
Is the best.
We'll go with that.
All right, so, Michael, the other issues with this story, I think we mentioned it, so it's not classic Spider-Man. The whole teleportation time travel thing, they never show it, except for that big yellow thing at the splash page, but you have no idea what it is.
Right.
So, that was a big flaw in the book. The guy with the green underpants, who we never get an explanation for who he is, that's a flaw. The creepy billboard with the guy with his mouth open, not a fan of that. What else, Michael? Anything else about this issue?
Well, I think the only really interesting idea in this whole book is the fact that Deathlok is in it, and Deathlok has a cool backstory. But if you've been reading Deathlok, you would have already known that, right? So it's really only an interesting idea if you're a reader of Spider-Man. So it's like the novelty of being in 1990 in this future is really cool. But other than that, it's definitely not a well-written issue. I mean, it's fun to read, but it's not great. And the dialogue's pretty bad, as we said.
It has a lot of fights. I like fights.
Yeah.
So it did have a lot of fights. So that's pretty good. And the Buscema art here is fine.
Yeah, it's fine. It's standard Buscema. It's not brilliant, but it's definitely classic Marvel art. So I definitely enjoy it for sure. We get some Wet and Blazes in there, so that's good.
Yeah, and Chum. Listen to me, Chum.
Yeah.
So, Kevin, 1 out of 10, what would you give Marvel Tales? 46.
Oh, sorry. I've been cutting out here, so I apologize.
Yeah, sorry.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
I think everyone just turned on everything in the house and are downloading everything at the same time as I'm having my interview here. So you were asking to rate Marvel Team Up number 46 out of 1 out of 10?
Yes.
I'm probably I'll give it around a 6 just because it's a different concept. But, and like I said, I think I'm a little biased because it was one of my first early Spidey comics, but still find it disturbing today.
Yeah. Mike L., what about you?
I would give it I don't know. I'd probably give it maybe a 5. I mean, I would definitely read it again because I enjoy Bill Mantlo and Sal Buscema, but it's not great. So I'd give it a 5.
Yeah, I'm with you, Michael. 5 sounds about right. The art, like the art's solid, it's fine, but nothing like amazing. And there are some big holes in the story. Deathlok, I'll say this about Deathlok. He's an interesting looking fella, but they could have done more with his costume in terms of like the shirt. It's just like a red shirt with one yellow wire sticking out of it.
Yeah, you're right.
It's kind of that put together quick. Some of these characters. I mean, that I find that with some of the '70s stuff. It's kind of like, didn't do enough on there.
Yeah, I can't remember what he looked like when he came back in the '90s, but I'm guessing it was way better than this.
It was actually pretty much the same.
Similar. Yeah, really? I just think they used maybe some better inking, but it's pretty much the same. There wasn't much difference.
Could have at least given him a flannel shirt.
Yeah, there you go.
But all right, so there it is, Marvel Tales 46. It's middle of the road. All right, what can you do? Now, Mike L., since, again, it's next week, it's your pick again, because you cheated me out of my pick. And it's still, Kevin, I don't know if you're aware of this, but Mike L. loves October, as he likes to call it, Shocktober.
Yep.
So are we getting another Halloween-themed pick next week, Mike?
Well, we're getting a semi-horror-themed pick next week. Okay. And I know that Kevin's going to like this. Are you ready for this, Mike Dell? In fact, I think you're going to like this character, too. I got a feeling.
Right.
Of course, we're going to go back to DC because everybody loves DC.
I hope it's OMAC.
And this is 1970s DC from the line of DC superstars, and this is the Spectre.
Ooh,
nice.
I like the Spectre.
That's right. Yeah. Drawn by Jim Aparo.
Oh,
I like the old
even better.
Yep.
What were they, Michael? The Justice Society. I like the Justice Society kids.
Yeah, and this is Adventure Comics number. What is this? Number 431.
Adventure Comics 431. Now, does this tie into Shocktober in any way, shape, or form?
No, it's just he's somewhat a horror themed superhero.
I got to say, Michael, I'm disappointed. I was expecting like a Werewolf by Night or something like that.
That'll be next year.
All right, so just the one Shocktober pick this year.
Yep.
Sorry, kids, just one. All right. Well, Kevin, thank you so much for joining the big show. You're great.
Thank you for having me. Apologize about the connection issues.
Don't worry about it. Michael will clean it all up in post.
That's right.
Michael?
That's right.
Awesome.
Add some music. That'll fix everything. So we do a new, we do an old comic book review every week from the 1970s or 1980s. Flea Market Fantasy is available on Stitcher, Spotify, iTunes, under Comic Book Syndicate. We're also on Twitter, YouTube. We're on the Comic Book Syndicate website and Facebook. So until next Tuesday, disperse!